really, really difficult situation to do what she had to do. So here she is, working to support herself and her mother-in-law. And we find that God does something really, really curious here. And the story is found in Ruth chapter 2, where eventually Boaz, the owner of the barley field, comes up to her. Let's pick it up in verse 12. And this is what he says. And it's really interesting because he has, it says in the previous verse, he has heard about this woman. I've heard about you, and I've heard about your care for Naomi. So in verse 12, this is what he pronounces over her. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Now let's just ponder this for a minute. We can look at that and maybe our gaze as we read this is totally on Ruth. I looked at this and I thought, yeah, but what's going on in Boaz's life? What's going on with this guy? He's not 35. How old was Boaz? How old was he? The fact that Boaz could refer to Ruth in verse 8. Look how he refers to Ruth in verse 8. Ruth chapter 2 verse 8. How old is this guy? Look what he says. Then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter. How old is this guy? 50? Maybe? 50-year-old guy? Maybe? Never married? What's he thinking? Will I ever be married? God, have you abandoned me? Will I ever be a father? Will I ever have an heir to what I own? God, please. Maybe if we could sneak a peek at his prayer journal, that might be the sentiment. At least 50. I mean, you work it out. How old do you have to be the father of a 35-year-old woman? 50's being generous. Probably up it a bit. This guy, life has slipped through his fingers a bit and he's like, well, I've been overlooked. And he pronounces this blessing in verse 12 to Ruth. And at this point, I don't think he's thinking she's going to be my wife. I don't think he's thinking that. He's referred to her as his daughter. He's taken a fatherly sort of approach to her. And here we go. But what Boaz doesn't know at this point is that God has heard his prayer, perhaps if he's been praying this way, and God's about to redeem him as well. God is about to redeem him through this girl, Ruth. So we've seen that God, we know from the overall story, God is going to redeem Ruth. God has been able to redeem Naomi, who was left abandoned, penniless, in poverty, and now Ruth is bringing home heaps of barley, heaps of food. Now Ruth is being blessed. The situation's turning around for Naomi, and the situation is about to turn around for Boaz. And this is where we come to chapter 3, where Naomi says, just prior to chapter 3, says to Ruth, hey, where are you getting all this food from? You know, you're coming home with wine and barley and bread and cakes and raisins, and where's all this coming from? And she said, from just a guy I met down the road. His name is Boaz. And Naomi goes, Boaz? Did you say Boaz? Sweetie, sit down. Have I got some news for you? Under our law, he's what we call a kinsman redeemer. And Ruth, she's a Moabite. She's not a Hebrew girl. And she's like, and what does that mean? That means he's obliged to marry you. And Ruth goes, oh, okay. What do I do? What do I do? So now we pick it up. Chapter 3, we see this exchange, and this is what she says. Verse 3, wash therefore. It's always good. Relationships, Bible's very practical. Just a lot of guys just need to underline that, just by the way. Just wash. And anoint yourself. That means, for guys, aftershave. And for some, lots of it. And for women, it's perfume, and not, from a guy's perspective, please not too much. It's like, anyway. And put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go, uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say I will do. Now, we're not given any background clue in the Bible as to where on earth this custom came from. But man, it sure would have saved me a lot of heartache and a lot of hassle, a lot of chocolate, a lot of flowers, let me tell you. It's not our custom. So girls, but there is actually a serious point to be made here. She in one sense got into bed with Boaz, in one sense. And there is a sense in which some Christian girls think that the only way they can win the heart of a guy is to get into bed with them. And that's just not true.